The story takes place in an old family. This family's house is unbelievably luxurious. But unlike other noble clans that only display sculptures or famous paintings, this family worships all kinds of games. It was a stormy night. The older brother Daniel was pulling his younger brother Alex, running wildly throughout the house. Suddenly, a man drenched in sweat pulled Daniel back, terrified, begging Daniel to save him. It seemed someone was chasing him, wanting to take his life. Before he could finish his words, the sound of a bowstring twanged. An arrow from a crossbow pierced straight through the man's chest. A woman in a wedding dress screamed, but couldn't stop the horrifyingly masked figures from dragging the man away. That scene became a memory that the young Daniel would never forget. 30 years later, Grace in a pure white wedding dress repeatedly read her wedding speech. Although she had long memorized it, today was the momentous day she would join her husband's family. She was about to marry into the Lut Domes clan. Although not officially home yet, she could already feel her father-in-law hated her. Her brother-in-law Daniel just teased her indifferently. Just hearing these forms of address was enough to know this was a complicated family. Even so, Grace was still eager to join. The elders in the family are quite traditional. They like the stable kind of love, dating for 5 to 6 years before getting married. They don't understand the instant noodle culture of the youth. Grace and Alex's 18-month relationship was already considered very rare among the young. Alex didn't pay any mind. He said, "Let them think what they want. They're all rotten to the core anyway." Just then, the brother-in-law Daniel walked in. The wedding ceremony below was hurrying them. Grace was very excited. Daniel immediately told her, "It's still not too late to run. You don't belong in this family." Grace pouted. It seemed her brother-in-law still despised her, but for some reason, Alex also felt a little uneasy. Everything at the wedding went very smoothly. In front of the camera, Grace forced an unnatural smile. The father-in-law whispered to Daniel beside him. With Alex's standing, he could clearly marry someone much better. His expression was very natural, but his words were filled with disdain. Perhaps that's why Alex hadn't come home for 2 years. It wasn't because of the marriage that everyone in the family thought Alex had unilaterally cut ties. The aunt, the father-in-law's sister, wearing a purple outfit, sat on a small stool nearby, her face extremely displeased, not saying a word. The sister-in-law looked very powerful, her words also sharp and harsh. "She will never become one of us." The sister-in-law and brother-in-law arrived late. It seemed they were always tardy. The father-in-law especially hated the brother-in-law, considering him the most useless person in the house. The way everyone in this family behaved made Grace feel very suffocated. She had a hard time finding a place to hide and breathe a sigh of relief. The mother-in-law followed. Grace was scared and quickly sucked in her stomach. The mother-in-law came looking for her for a smoke. Unexpectedly, after just a couple of stories, Grace discovered her mother-in-law was exceptionally approachable. Perhaps because the mother-in-law also came from a similar background as her, both commoners. After the bride and groom kissed, the wedding was completed smoothly. The two returned to their honeymoon suite, preparing to end the most important night of their lives with a perfect period. As the two were dawdling, Grace suddenly saw someone standing in the room, startling them both. The person standing there was the aunt, who had come to tell them to come down for a meeting. Everyone was already waiting. After the aunt left, Alex explained a little. The aunt came in through the servants' passage. Small doors like that are everywhere in the house, like a maze. Sometimes even he wasn't sure. Grace asked what the meeting was for. This was the reason for Alex's hesitation. Their family has a tradition. A new member must participate in a game at midnight. The types of games are very diverse, all decided by drawing a card. Chess, board games, or something. It's actually not hard. No need to win. Just participating is enough. After hearing this, Grace showed interest. In the game room, the father-in-law asked Alex if he had explained the situation clearly to Grace. Alex said he would never tell, because tomorrow morning they would both leave this house forever and never return. The father-in-law asked again, "So if Grace draws the card she shouldn't draw, are you ready to do what needs to be done?" Alex didn't answer. In her wedding speech today, Grace's story moved many people. She was an orphan, raised in foster homes, growing up full of stumbles before meeting Alex. This path was not easy at all. The mother-in-law, on the contrary, cherished her even more. Precisely because she knew the immense pain of having nowhere to belong, Grace treasured the new family she was about to join even more. The mother-in-law held Grace's hand and whispered heartfelt words. The first time she met Grace, the mother-in-law already liked her and also thanked her for bringing Alex back home. But most importantly, she had helped Alex truly return to the clan. Grace didn't fully understand the deep meaning in those words. The screams of children suddenly filled the house. It was the sister-in-law's 2 sons. The masks they held in their hands made Daniel particularly uncomfortable. The fat brother-in-law scornfully cursed Daniel, then turned to greet Grace, saying his private jet had just taken off. With a noble constitution like his, he couldn't stand the torment of commercial flights. The sister-in-law excitedly grasped Grace's hand, saying she often followed Grace's social media account and wanted the two to become good sisters. The aunt beside them seemed to hold her in great contempt. The butler loudly announced the time was 11:55. The game was about to begin. Grace was led into the Lou Domes clan's game room. Inside was filled with candles. On the walls hung large animal specimens. Hunting rifles and a painting of the Lou Domes ancestors hunting a tiger showed the clan's heroic history of conquering nature. Everyone sat down. The father-in-law began to explain the origin and meaning of the game. The Lou Domes clan originally worked in printing, specializing in producing playing cards. After a generation of effort, they expanded into sports equipment and board games. To this day, the Lou Domes clan is a tycoon in the board game industry. Many people say this is luck, but they know it's thanks to someone always helping in the shadows. As he spoke, the father-in-law took out an antique box. Before opening the print shop, his great-grandfather was a small, unknown sailor. Until one day, he met a gentleman named Lubale. Mr. Lubale was a collector who traded jewelry and luxury goods for America's super-rich. The two got along very well, so Mr. Lubale gave this box to the great-grandfather. If the great-grandfather could open it before disembarking, then all of the great-grandfather's future decisions would receive Mr. Lubale's investment. The story after that, everyone knows. Since then, whenever a new member joins the clan, everyone adds a blank card to the box, and the box will decide the game to be played. The box was passed to Grace. Grace placed the card in as requested. The result that appeared was hide and seek. Grace giggled, still worried that this game seemed too childish for a group of people whose total age was over 1,000 years. When she looked up, the whole room was dead silent. Alex was even pale-faced. The father-in-law officially declared the game had begun. Everyone get ready. The magic of the game lies in this. No matter how naive, as long as the participant is active, anyone can quickly get into it. Grace was stimulated by everyone's serious attitude. Her fighting spirit ignited. Alex told her to go back to the room first, but Grace even refused, saying she wanted to have fun. The rules are very simple. Grace can hide in any corner of the house. Everyone will count to 100 and then go find her. To respect the fairness of the game, all surveillance cameras in the house will be turned off. While the father-in-law was explaining the rules, the butler in the control room had turned off all the cameras and locked all the doors. It was time to play hide and seek. Grace went to hide first. The family didn't count, but for some reason, with complicated expressions, they took out all sorts of weapons. Some were happy, some were sad. The mother-in-law even told Alex not to play, just to stay put and be good. This isn't hide and seek. This is no different from a mammoth hunt. Grace had a hard time finding a dumbwaiter. She suddenly felt a strange mood. Thinking about how later when people asked what her wedding night was like, she could only say, "It was great. I hid all night in a food elevator." Grace really couldn't stand being in the dumbwaiter. The moment she stepped out, she was pulled into a room by Alex. Alex told Grace to keep her voice down and was about to explain in detail when one of the maids entered the room. It seems her two nephews, the sister-in-law's sons, weren't sleeping well and had run out again. Alex pulled Grace to hide under the bed, only to hear a loud bang. The maid's head had been blown off. The one who fired the shot was the sister-in-law. The family ran over and scolded the sister-in-law for having no eyes. Does a maid's uniform look like a wedding dress? Grace covered her mouth, tears of fear streaming down. The sister-in-law who just a short while ago wanted to be best friends now wanted to kill her. Is this really the new home she's marrying into, or a haunted house? The relatives, without batting an eye, carried the body out. The aunt even said that was her favorite maid, but her tone held no emotion whatsoever. Grace collapsed, not knowing how to react. Alex was very worried. His phone seemed to have been confiscated by them too. Only now did he begin to explain the real rules to Grace. The hide and seek that Grace drew was the worst card in the deck. The person who draws this card must be killed before dawn. If the game isn't completed, Mr. Lubale will be enraged and the clan will face disaster. For example, when their uncle got married, he didn't play the game, and the next morning he was dead. Similar examples were endless. Grace burst into tears in agony. Not because of how terrifying this was, but because why did Alex, who clearly knew hide and seek was the worst card, not stand up and object for her, and even waited until now when her life was on the line to tell her the truth? Alex seemed to suddenly have an epiphany and said to Grace, "If I had told you, you would have left me from the start. You are my everything. I promise you will get out. We will get out, okay?" Grace was no longer sulking. Having resolved their conflict, the two split up. Alex went to the surveillance room to open the doors, while Grace would sneak to the kitchen and get out through the back door. After saying that, Alex left Grace alone again. Grace struggled to regain her composure, changed into canvas shoes, and tore the hem of her wedding dress for easier movement. As she was walking, she opened a door, only to run right into her sister-in-law. The sister-in-law screamed and raised her hand, firing a shot. Although it missed Grace, it made the relatives carrying the maid's corpse behind them tumble to the ground. Grace quickly ran into the library. Luckily, no one followed. Just as Grace blocked the door with a sofa, Daniel entered from the servants' passage. The two looked at each other, the atmosphere extremely awkward. Luckily, Daniel wasn't quite like the other relatives. He only came for a drink. However, being a family member, he still had to inform the others. He just didn't want to be the one to do it. So he gave Grace 10 seconds. Daniel led the relatives to the library, creating time for Grace to escape. The first one to arrive was the sister-in-law. After all, the sister-in-law had been married to Daniel for so long. Not seeing Grace, one didn't need to guess to know Daniel had gone soft. Daniel suddenly mentioned the sister-in-law's appearance when she first married into the family, when he explained the rules to her. She didn't even blink, looking as if she couldn't wait to sell her soul. The sister-in-law's background wasn't good either. To get everything she has today, she could even sacrifice her own life. The family members arrived one by one, still not finding Grace. They decided to take a short break and reconsider their battle plan. The sister-in-law, because she was so stressed just now, had snuck off to snort something and couldn't remember where she put her gun. The brother-in-law then gave her his crossbow. Anyway, he had been fumbling with it and didn't know how to use it. He had just watched a tutorial video in the bathroom. Today's topic: know your crossbow. Unexpectedly, the moment they switched hands, the sister-in-law accidentally pulled the trigger. Just then, another maid entered to report Grace's whereabouts. An arrow whizzed through the air and pierced straight into her mouth. All the family members showed a pitiful expression, as if they were pitying a child who accidentally spilled a glass of water, patting their head and wanting to give them candy. This couldn't go on. The mother-in-law suggested turning on the surveillance cameras. You'd be a fool not to use high-tech. The aunt had a strong objection. For so many years they had followed the rules left by the great-grandfather. They must respect tradition. Everyone argued noisily. Finally, the father-in-law stepped in to unify their opinions. Back in the day, the great-grandfather didn't use it because he didn't have it. They had also never met such a strong opponent, so they still had to turn on the cameras. Finishing the game is the most important thing now. Grace kept running back to the game room because she remembered the great-grandfather's hunting rifle and ammunition were hung on the wall here because the relatives were ganging up on her. She wasn't going to be polite anymore. After changing her equipment, Grace followed Alex's route to the kitchen, just waiting for the door to open. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the butler entered to boil water for tea, humming a song as if everything that happened tonight had nothing to do with him. Grace hid under the table preparing to load her gun. Alex had also just turned on the surveillance cameras. Watching the situation in the kitchen, his palms sweating from tension. He immediately operated the console to unlock the door. Just as the butler was about to see what was happening, Grace pressed a gun to his head from behind. Unexpectedly, the butler wasn't scared at all, because these bullets were stored by him. He knew best. They were all just decorations. The butler wasn't smart for more than 2 seconds. Grace grabbed the nearby hot kettle and smashed it on his head, taking the opportunity to sneak back into the house. Alex saw this and was about to applaud, but the voices of his father-in-law and Daniel sounded from outside the surveillance room. Alex quickly smashed the camera console. The father-in-law rushed in and choked him, but how could an old man be a match for a young one? Daniel stopped Alex. Brothers are more reliable. The moment Alex let his guard down, the father-in-law knocked him out cold. When Grace ran over, she happened to see 2 people carrying Alex out horizontally. Terrified, she quickly had to hide again. She returned to the original dumbwaiter. Inside was the last remaining maid, hiding. The maid jumped in fright. She was new too, and didn't know this family often played so big. She wasn't even a real maid. The father-in-law just liked watching her dance, so he kept her around. Grace thought she had found an ally and was about to let her guard down. But the next second the maid started screaming, "She's here." While screaming, she accidentally pressed the button to lower the elevator. Her eyes stared blankly as the elevator crushed her. Alex was carried back to his room. Little Grace alone had taken up so much time, still not resolved. On this side, not only were 3 maids lost, but the security system couldn't be fixed either. All the relatives were extremely dejected. Now the only solution they could think of was for each person to guard an exit. This scene couldn't help but remind the aunt of her own story from long ago. 30 years ago when she got married, her great-uncle-in-law, the husband of the father-in-law's sister, also drew the hide-and-seek card. Who would have known that back then she was just an innocent young girl? If life hadn't been so unfortunate, she wouldn't have to be a widow for so many years. Her hair already turned white. The feeling of losing a loved one is so painful. At that time, she shouldn't have struggled. Taking her great-uncle-in-law's life with her own hands would have been a release. Alex's situation now is exactly the same as back then. Now, actually, the most important thing is for Alex to come to his senses on his own, to kill Grace with his own hands, and inherit the position of head of the family. No one is more suitable than Alex, because he is the only one in the family who has ever met Mr. Lubale. After the father-in-law and the aunt had a huge fight and left, Alex opened his eyes. He had heard everything just now. The brother-in-law had snuck off again and was searching on his phone. Is a deal with the devil real or fake after all? While happily engrossed, he didn't notice Grace jump down from the upper floor and hide in the courtyard. Suddenly, a flashlight beam shone from behind. Grace had no choice but to hide in the nearby shed. Once inside, she discovered it was full of goats. Before Grace could think, her nephew in his pajamas appeared before her with a flashlight. So tiny, he looked very safe. Grace breathed a sigh of relief and was about to explain in detail when a shot from the nephew's gun went through Grace's palm. Enraged, she threw a punch that knocked the nephew unconscious. Just as she picked up the flashlight, the black goat beside her suddenly appeared in front of her, startling her, causing her to step back and fall into a pit. Before she could see clearly, a terrible stench made her nauseous and vomit uncontrollably. Inside was full of goat carcasses. There was even a human skeleton. Grace was so scared that even with her hand in excruciating pain, she still tried to crawl out of this hell and leave the goat pen. Grace was seen by the sister-in-law. The sister-in-law quickly went to inform the other relatives, telling the butler to go capture Grace. Grace went to the fence and frantically cried for help to the outside. But this mansion was deep in the desolate mountains. Not even a small animal could be seen. Fortunately, to prepare for this wedding, Grace had eaten who knows how much grass. She managed to squeeze through the incredibly narrow fence. At this moment, a luxury car passed by. Grace stopped the car, but was cursed out by the rich young master inside. Grace had no choice but to flee into the forest. After arranging for the butler to give chase, the whole family gathered again. The atmosphere of despair was heavier than ever. The father-in-law even cursed at the portrait. Can't you talk to Mr. Lubale to get less strict conditions? Do we really have to kill like this? Daniel couldn't care less. It's 2019. He advised everyone not to be so superstitious anymore and to learn a little science. As a result, just for one disagreeable sentence, he was punished by his father-in-law to dispose of the maids' bodies. The place to dump the bodies was the goat pen that Grace had just crawled out of. The sister-in-law went with Daniel. After all, of the three, two were killed by her. A bunch of rotten people like their family deserved to die. The nephew's faint mumble came from the corner of the room. The sister-in-law asked the child why he was here. The child said he found a gun, saw Grace and shot. Daniel asked why. The child said because everyone else was doing it. The sister-in-law even praised him for doing a good job, so proud. Daniel had already lost all moral standards. Seeing this scene, he sank even lower. Grace was on foot while the butler drove. Very quickly, Grace was caught by the butler on the lawn. The two wrestled on the ground. It's unknown how much hardship Grace endured growing up that she was so strong in a fight. A trained man was no match for her. She choked him and he fell to the ground. Grace stole the car. The luxury car had a one-touch emergency satellite phone service. Grace dialed to call the police, but the other end of the line slowly said that this